Welcome to Unscrew the News. It's Bruce Scholl, and my goodness, I am so excited to have you here. We are waking up the world one little brain cell at a time. Hopefully, we are hitting more of them today than yesterday. Let's keep doing that. I am so grateful to have you here with me. What an amazing opportunity I have. A couple of years ago, I guess I have made contact with a person in regard to a documentary that really hit home for me. Anyway, that started a chain reaction. Turns out that the third documentary of this person has now come out, and I'm looking forward to finding out more about this documentary. It's unfortunate that we have to be exposing this information, but it is the truth, and we are looking to find the truth. So I want to welcome my next guests. I'm looking to bring Jackie DeVoy and Richie Brown to join us here on Unscrew the News. Thank you very much for joining me. It is a pleasure to have the two of you here. And Jackie, you and I have talked on a couple of occasions because you had two previous interviews with me on two other documentaries, A Good Death and Playing God. And Richie, you're just joining us for the first time. You're obviously a podcaster, well, I don't know if documentary work is in your I guess in your repertoire before, but Jackie, tell us a little bit about you to begin with, if you don't mind, just to give our viewers another idea of where you come from. I know that you're a journalist previously as well.
Yeah, I'm from England. Lived in London most of my life. I was a freelance journalist from 1985. Started working on teen magazines, then moved on to women's magazines and newspapers, and have been doing that in a freelance capacity ever since then. Managed to somehow make a living out of it, which is quite amazing in this day and age.
Yes.
In the last 5 years, I've obviously got quite disillusioned with the mainstream media because of the way they've been, spreading misinformation and propaganda. Didn't really want to be part of that. Started working more for alternative news sites and publications such as TV and The Light newspaper. And I will do bits and pieces for the mainstream. I've been doing a lot of travel journalism in the last sort of 6 years. Well, not a lot, obviously, because a few years of it, no one was going anywhere. But I started in 2018 doing that. And it just kind of balances things out a bit, because a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with, with the articles that I write and the films that I make are pretty dark and quite draining to work on, as Richie's probably just realised on this most recent film.
No kidding.
Seen about things that go on in hospitals and care homes behind closed doors. So yeah.
Well, I am so grateful for the work that you've done, Jackie, and I know this is definitely a personal mission. It seems like from the times that you and I have talked. And then, of course, tell us how. Well, no, Richie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first, if you don't mind?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm the editor of diplomaticpost.co.uk. We started out, and there's only a couple of us, but we started out and we were mostly focused on wars, kind of wars, history, ideology, that kind of thing. And then we started looking at energy we started looking at like the science of environmentalism.
Mm-hmm.
And through deep research, like years of research we essentially came to the conclusion it was all tied to eugenics. Like all the environmentalists since like the late 19th century have been eugenicists. So I've had a history of my general disgust for eugenics. And then for this documentary, the first time I'd heard from someone I quite respected was Michelle Sterling, who appeared on the second episode of my podcast. And we were discussing eugenics and environmentalism and the science of the complete corrupt climate change movement.
Right.
And about an hour and a bit into it, she mentioned, we got onto the topic, and she mentioned how many people have been killed in care homes. And that was the first time I'd sort of heard anything really about it. I'd seen some stuff from kind of less reputable sites where I didn't really know what to think.
Right.
And about that time, the Scottish COVID inquiry was ongoing, and I started picking up videos from the Scottish COVID inquiry from a fella that does a lot of clipping from that called Biology Phenom on Substack. And it was just unbelievable to see people going to these COVID inquiries in Scotland and saying what had happened to them, how their mum, dad, or grandparents had been starved to death, or they'd been ventilated, or they'd been given like kill shots of midazolam and morphine. I was a bit like, why isn't this front page news anywhere?
Right.
Not that I read mainstream media these days, but I still remember thinking, like, no one knows about this. And if you go on like the Scottish COVID inquiry, their YouTube or their website, and you look at the view count for their videos, they only get about 500 to 1,000 people watching their videos. So this shocked me a bit. I looked into a bit more, came across Jackie Devoy's 2 documentaries, and invited her on for a podcast. We got chatting, and she said, "Oh, we've got loads of people still affected by this, and they still want to have their story kind of heard." So we kind of floated the idea of, well, I'm out in West England. Why don't we film anyone that's in West England? And from there, we sort of ended up doing the podcast, the documentary, which ended up being a documentary, because originally it was just going to be, I think we were just going to film them and basically upload them online, weren't we, Jackie?
Right.
Yeah, it's going to be like a series of separate interviews, because we were just trying to think of a different way to do it. But
Yeah.
it actually works well as a documentary. I think gradually, I mean, Richie did the narration and a lot of the research, and then we kind of interspersed it with these interviews, which are obviously very personal. And a lot of these people I've known for quite a long time, because back in 2021, when I was making A Good Death, I set up a support group. It was mainly just for me to kind of initially to keep everyone in one place, because there were so many people coming to me with their stories.
Right.
After I did on David Icke's podcast back in December 2020, after that, lots and lots of people came forward and wanted to speak to me about their own experiences. So I set up this group, and it became a support group, really, because everyone started talking to each other. It's like a WhatsApp group, and helping each other and doing research together. And in that group now, like 4 years later, there's some real experts in there. You know, I can go to certain people there, and they know everything about everything that's been going on, and, you know, all the different protocols, you know, the NG161, all the details of that, NG191, and all the ins and outs of everything that's going on in the National Health Service with regards to this involuntary euthanasia, which is such a strange phrase to use, because involuntary euthanasia means that someone is being killed, put down, if you like, against their wishes, which to me is murder. Even if they wanted to be killed, it's still classed as murder, you know, legally. It's an unlawful thing to do, and it carries the same jail sentence to help someone kill themselves as it does for murder. So then we've got the whole issue of the assisted dying bill. They're trying to desperately bring that in. Obviously, you've got MAID in Canada, a massive slippery slope that we can see there.
Yes.
So it's all very worrying. So we put the film together, and it's come out super long as well, which we weren't anticipating. But we've had over 5,000 views on YouTube. We put it up last Sunday, and nobody's complained about the length of it. I think it was quite a brave thing. It was Richie's idea to do that. I think it's a brave thing to do, because I've got a really short attention span, so have a lot of people these days, and to sit and watch a 2.5 hour video, but most people say it goes in a flash, and even though it's very distressing to watch, you know, you can't kind of take your eyes off it, because it is so kind of a mix of, you know, car crash sort of horror and information, you know, that people need to know, because I think it's the sort of thing that if you haven't been affected by it already, it will affect you at some point in your life.
Absolutely. Are you okay if I play the trailer now, just to give people a sense of what we're talking about? Because the three of us have a pretty good idea, but maybe our viewers haven't seen it yet. So let's just play this, and we'll take a look at it, okay?
Pandemic, the bourgeoisie in government and the pharmaceutical industrial complex and their lackeys in parliament unleashed a brutal attack on the elderly of this country, turning care homes into mass murder sites, denying families the right to access their own family members and murdering them with carefully planned death protocols. They boasted about improving the economy. the Scottish COVID inquiry that awoke me to the scale of what had been done and how our corrupt, prostitute media had sought to mystify, fog and silence what was taking place. The withdrawal of food and liquids plied with midazolam and morphine ventilated to death or slapped a do not resuscitate order on.
Because that's it. I said, just give my mum palliative care medicines. I'm getting used charged with my 35 house to my mum. But we weren't allowed that. We weren't allowed to do anything.
These murders didn't take place in isolation, but in context of a giant population pyramid with an aging population. Rising pension liabilities, economic pressures, and a colossal national debt with a rotten economic mode of production incapable of solving these issues without a mass culling or a mass rearmament for war. A question has to be asked. If the government was so concerned about Granny in 2020, why did they implement death protocols that would kill untold thousands of them in 2020 under the NG163 document? With the passing of the euthanasia bill, we have gone to protect Granny, to murder her because she's a burden. Britain in 2025 shows the decadence and wanton disregard for human life characteristic of a neo-fascist culture. This is Unseen, the truth behind the death protocols, where I follow 8 families affected by those death protocols. Empowered from the government top down, doctors and nurses have been allowed to decide who is fit to die. The Scottish COVID inquiry has received little to no media attention, even from so-called old media. However, here are some testimonies that alerted me to the barbarism taking place inside our country and what eventually led to the creation of this documentary.
The shielding of vulnerable people and the elderly who are the most affected by this virus, that is in our plan.
I feel my mother was murdered, basically, and I think that's why it's very difficult for me to get over it.
And she wrote morphine and midazolam. It's the first, even asking the question, first time I'd known about the use of midazolam. And that's when I realised I'd actually let it happen on my watch. And I'd gone in to stop it and still never stopped it.
I think the midazolam and morphine was a massive factor because I feel like even with the ventilator.
So do you know if she'd been put on an end-of-life pathway?
Yes, yeah, they had. They put her on that. They said she was 76, she's coming to the end of her life. And my mum was nothing like it. She had nothing wrong with her at all. She was as fit as me. And the only thing she was doing was grieving my dad.
The COVID inquiry has been told that Matt Hancock wanted the ultimate say on who should live and who should die.
Wow. Holy smokes. So.
It doesn't get any better.
No, it certainly doesn't.
Gold continues to surge to new highs as stocks fall. The threat of a global trade war is here, and you need to protect your savings. Stop trying to time the market and start buying today. Nuggetstacker.com.
Well, so first of all, I have some history in dealing with some of these things. How does it, first of all, Richie, how does it make you feel when you had to go through this and do these interviews? How does it affect you personally?
Yeah, I mean, it's not enjoyable. It's very terrible to hear these stories. Again and again, the same stories coming up. It's a very dark subject matter. I think I'm pretty good at being able to kind of silo off a bit, though, to work on something like that. But yeah, I definitely say it's quite a heavy subject, and a lot of people that have watched it that I know have said that it was a bit heavy and I had to stop, which right. I totally understand.
Yeah. Now, Jackie, you've been doing this for a while, and I know that your dad was affected, and you realized only after that perhaps your dad had gone through it, or are you now solid in that understanding that maybe they had used the same protocols on your dad. I don't remember.
I made a good death with Iconic Media initially because someone had come to me with the story of their loved one being euthanized.
Yeah.
And I believed him, and he also had a big pile of incontrovertible evidence. So there was no not believing him. But at that point, it wasn't personal to me at all. And then other people started coming to me, and I was focusing on all these other people. But within a month or so of talking to people, it just suddenly struck me that that's what had happened to my mum back in 2009.
Oh, your mum, right?
Yeah, she was 68. She had breast cancer, and she was put in a hospice. And I went to visit her one day, June the 1st, 2009, and watched them set up a thing on her arm, which I now know is a syringe driver.
Yeah.
I didn't question it. The nurses were ever so lovely there. All the people that worked in the hospice were nice. It was a lovely place. They let me stay the night there for 2 nights. And then on the third day, she stopped breathing. She had been struggling. I could see she was struggling, but she was paralyzed basically. But she could still make these terrible growling sort of noises, like she was really struggling to breathe.
Right.
And I kept saying to her, "What's up? Why are you making those noises?" I had no idea what was going on. And then she just stopped breathing on June the 3rd at midday on the dot. I turned and looked at the clock, and the second hand it was like a film, just kind of clicked onto the
Wow.
It was the 3rd of the 6th, 09 at midday, 36912. Very weird. I remember just thinking that the next day. And then the funeral was on a really strange series of numbers date as well. But so it dawned on me while I was talking to Gareth Icke at the time. He had me on the show to talk about a good death, and that we were about to make it. Because Jamie had come to me knowing that I was having no joy getting it into the mainstream news at all. And it was all quite new at that point, and people were just not having it. They were like, no, that wouldn't happen. The NHS wouldn't do that. Our government wouldn't do that. So he'd said, let's make it into a film. I was talking to Gareth about it, and it suddenly kind of struck me, oh my God, that's what happened to my mum. And my dad was alive at this point, so he was aware of the film I was making. He'd been in a care home. I'd got him out of the care home. He knew that he knew all about this involuntary euthanasia. He's like, oh, that's not going to happen to me, is it? And I'm like, no way, because I know about this stuff.
Right.
You've got a really good carer. She's looking after you. She's not going to let anyone come into the house and get you, So he was quite calm. But then one day, September the 24th, 2021, he wasn't feeling well. And so the carer called an ambulance. And on my suggestion, actually, because she said he seemed to be having trouble, like he was choking or something. So I thought it sounds a bit of emergency. And I said to the ambulance person when they got there, check his airways, give him some oxygen if he needs it. There's nothing wrong with him, I said, look, I'm going to come up anyway. I was an hour away, got in the car. Half an hour into the journey, I got a phone call saying he was dead. And I later found out from his carer that they'd injected him with something. He didn't know what.
Right.
And he'd had a fatal reaction to whatever it was. Let's put it that way. I had a good idea of what they'd injected him with. They'd called his GP to get some information about him. His GP wasn't there that day, so they spoke to another GP who didn't know my dad at all. And that GP said he was end of life. He was 76, so he wasn't old. End of life, palliative care, and that he had cancer. None of that was true. It's like he was reading someone else's notes, or he did it on purpose. And the paramedic acted upon that information, which just goes to show that if you are considered to be end of life or having palliative care or have a terminal illness, they deem it okay to kill you in your own bed, in your own house. So then it did become personal. And I've never really had a chance to think about it too much or even grieve. And hundreds of people I've spoken to feel the same. They cannot grieve, they cannot even think too much about it, because when you've had someone murdered, you need to get justice before you can grieve, and none of them have got justice. So
you said something, Jackie, that I want to ask you about, and maybe Richie, you can answer this, because maybe you're noticing this a bit more, but you said on the first movie, A Good Death, that it's new and not a lot of people know about it. But has that changed really? I mean, has it really changed in the 3 or 4 years that have gone by? Because I don't see anybody else really paying attention to this. I mean,
yeah, definitely, definitely, people are definitely waking up to it now.
Yeah.
You know, I could have spoken to you know, someone in the street or the hairdresser or the woman in the shop, you know, and they would look at me like I was crazy 4 years ago. But now they're saying, oh, yeah, I've heard something about that. Yeah, I don't want to go into hospital. I'll get worried. My dad's in there and I'm making sure that he's okay every day. Because, yeah, people have definitely heard about it. The word is definitely out. And,
right. And you guys have had the Scottish trials. So that's obviously brought a fair bit of awareness to
the Scottish inquiry. We've got the UK COVID inquiry as well, which is also revealing this sort of stuff. It wasn't at the start, but it is now. But as Richie said, no one's aware of the COVID inquiry, the Scottish or the UK. They call it the UK one, the English one, I call it. They're not even aware it's going on. It's not shown on TV. If it's not shown on TV and it's not in you know the national newspapers, people just think it doesn't exist. You know, so
yeah, and some like alt media personalities are saying that it's been a whitewash and stuff like that, but I don't think it has at all. It's all the stuff's come out. That all these care homes, like there's one woman saying that she was shocked to find all of her patients who had DNR notices on them. It was completely unusual. She was shocked to find that another woman that in a care home was shocked to find that if a woman fell over and like broke her hip, that kind of thing, they wouldn't take her to hospital unless she had a DNR on her file.
Oh my gosh!
Midazolam and morphine's come out. Everything's coming out. So I mean, some people may just assume that it's going to be a whitewash. Maybe that's why they're saying it. But if you actually watch it, it's all coming out at the moment. So yeah.
Well, I found out that my dad had a DNR on him in May 2020 in the care home, and I was asking. I phoned. Actually, it was one of the carers at the home phoned me. She just needed some extra information about my dad, and she just muttered something about, oh, he's got the DNR. That's good, yeah. And I said, sorry, what's a DNR? Because I didn't even know back then. And she explained what it was, and I said, oh, no, we don't want one of those. He's not terminally ill. You know, he's not ill at all. In fact, you know, he'd had a stroke and he was in the care home, I thought, for a short period of time while he recovered, because he kind of needed 24-hour care and a lot of help with washing and you know, going to the loo and all that kind of stuff. So I just thought, well, no, he doesn't need that, you know. So she said to me, oh no, they've all got those, and I said, why?
Why?
It's just part of the policy. And I'm like, well, it's my policy for my dad not to have one of those. So can you please remove it? And she said, no, we're not going to do that. And then when he was he had to go back into hospital a couple of times for minor issues. And again, I asked, is there a DNR in place? And they said, yes. And I said, well, I need to have that removed. So I contacted his GP. I've got all the emails here saying, please, can you make sure that there's no DNR on my dad? And she said, oh, no, there isn't one. Now this is after I got him out of the care home. They said, now he's home, there isn't one. So I thought, that's good. So the day he died, there were a couple of people had turned up, step family, and the ambulance paramedic guy asked them, is there a DNR in place? And they said, yes. And at this point, there wasn't, as far as I knew, because he was at home. And they'd confirmed, his GP had confirmed there wasn't one. And they said, yeah, we think so. And I also had power of attorney over my dad. I'd had it for quite a while when he actually died. And the paramedic asked the step family members, who's got power of attorney? She said on the phone that she's got it, referring to me. And said that we don't think she has. And she said that she has, but we don't believe her. And they probably just thought, great, no problems in the way. We don't have to listen to her and what she wants, because we believe she doesn't have power of attorney, even though I have, and I've got all the paperwork to prove it. And he's got a DNR in place, which he hadn't. But the issue is that they acted on that information, you know, whether it's right or wrong, they acted on that. And so they must have been given instructions. If there's no power of attorney, if there's a DNR in place, no matter if the person is ill or not, if they're over a certain age, it's usually over 80, but my dad was 76, then we can just murder them in their beds.
Well, I'm wondering if it's a default that they just assume, or they want to assume because it's easier for them, and they've been instructed to just have a DNR on anybody that's over, well, I don't know, 70 or something. I mean, they must have some sort of guideline that they've all decided that, oh, after 75 we're just going to murder them.
Well, even in the UK COVID inquiry, they've had a recent one where a teenager has had a DNR put on them, and I think they were disabled in some form. So I don't think it was just age. I think they were targeting disabled. I think it was like a systemic euthanasia plan.
So is it
vulnerable people? So
right.
back in 2020, I was told by a consultant doctor at a London hospital, we've got DNRs on people with mental health issues. We've got DNRs on the elderly. We've got DNRs on the terminally ill. We've also got DNRs on people, on children with autism when they come in. Anyone who's got ADHD, autism, any mental health issue, schizophrenia. We just stick it. She mentioned a woman of 30 who had schizophrenia. They put a DNR on her. So they're basically just saying, these people are somehow less than people who don't have these ailments and issues. And because of that, they have the DNR put on them and don't resuscitate them if anything goes wrong. Say during operation or whatever.
That's insane, and I think that's what we have to look forward to here in Canada, because of that slippery slope made program that we have here. I want to ask you though. You said that there's a UK COVID inquiry. Is that currently going on, or is that already passed?
It's still ongoing. So the Scottish COVID inquiry ran for some years. I think they're still going. I think even the Scottish one's still going. But the UK COVID inquiry is definitely going on. And some very really revealing things have come out from the UK one as well.
Okay. So with Unseen, what are your hopes with the documentary? I mean, I understand that you want more people to see it, but what are you hoping to have come out of it? Are you hoping that some authorities go and arrest somebody, or are you hoping that what is the hope?
You go first, Jackie.
I just have to say well, my hope is to further raise awareness. Sorry, it's really noisy out here. There's so many ambulances around where I live at the moment, and that sounds like an air ambulance. Anyway,
don't open the door, Jackie. Don't open the door.
The doors are open. So my hope is to further raise awareness. We raised a bit of awareness with the first film, A Good Death, and then Playing God as well. We put that out, and again with this film is even more detailed with more people in. I think we've got, you said 8 families. I think it's actually
11.
It was 11 and now it's 10. But anyway, so a lot more people. I think there are only 6 people speaking in A Good Death, and I think 5 or maybe 6 in Playing God. So we've got twice as many people telling their stories. The sad thing is, my support group, the one that I set up back in 2021, now has almost 200 people in it. And this is just a tiny, tiny percentage of the people I've spoken to, because not everyone is able, wants to join a support group. But over the last 4 years, I think I've spoken to probably, on social media threads and in private, and people who've come to me, I think probably nearly 1,000 people or more, easily. And every day, if I put a post on Twitter there's a massive thread, and with hundreds of people going, oh, that happened to my mum, that happened to my brother, and everyone I speak to about it seems to have a story. Whereas in 2020 and 2021, people were going, no, that's not happening. There's fewer of those people now, and more people saying, yeah, I've heard about that, and I think that might have happened to my sister or my dad. So yeah, people are definitely waking up to it, and I just think the more we get the word out there, the more outrage there'll be, because up until now there hasn't really been an awful lot of outrage on it, unless it's from the people who are personally affected. But my argument is, it's like I said to you earlier, we will all be affected. Most of us will be affected by this at some point, whether it's our loved ones that are getting into this situation, or yourself at some point, because I know it sounds very Logan's Run, but I do believe that that our governments worldwide want to reduce the population, and this is just one arm of that very horrible, sneaky octopus that's allowing them to do that. Obviously, they're coming at us from all angles. You know, they're making young people infertile. You know, that people are dying from the jabs, and this is just another way of getting rid of what allegedly Henry Kissinger called useless eaters or useless feeders, because they feel that the elderly and the vulnerable, the disabled, are a burden on society, and they need to be got rid of. They don't care who you are. They don't care what you've done in your life. You're just old now, and you are useless, and you need to go because you're getting in our way. So I think if people really knew the truth of what was going on, there would be more outrage, and the more outrage there is, the more chance there is of something happening. I think making films is just a tiny part of that in raising awareness, but a lot more needs to be done.
Yeah, I agree with all that, Jackie. I'd like to see sort of prosecutions as for in the most egregious cases. I mean, you hear some of these stories, and I'm a bit conspiratorial and a bit distrustworthy. So every time I hear a story, I'll think in my head, could they be lying? Could they be this and that? But the people we interviewed, they repeated the same thing over and over again, and like the callous disregard for the patients by the doctors and nurses. And I think that's just part of it, because once you sort of get on to a euthanasia slope where people start weighing up what someone else's life is worth, it always affects. They become more. The people involved in it have to become more callous, so they in turn become worse. Like if you look at It Clark, that was the film. What's it called? I Accuse. That was a Nazi propaganda film for the Action T4 euthanasia program. And in that, they had all the same propaganda you're coming out of Canada with the Maid, and recently with the More in Common Kim Leadbeater's thing. They all had the same propaganda that killing is caring. Like one of the defining lines in that movie is, oh, the husband says, I couldn't kill her because I loved her. And the doctor, who's also in love with the person he killed, says, oh, I killed her because I loved her. You know, they always try to frame it in that way. And but you know, the director of that film in 1968 went to trial as a participant of mass murder for releasing that film. And that was just if you watch that today and you'd seen like adverts, I don't know if you saw that Simon's commercial come out of Canada, which was the euthanasia commercial with that woman saying all is beauty. Do you guys remember that?
I
kind of remember it, but
yeah, I ended up uploading it to archive.org just on a whim, and if you search for it now, it's been deleted everywhere. You can't get it on YouTube or anything. So if you're looking for it, search for Simon's commercial "All Is Beauty: Canadian Assisted Suicide" on archive.org, and yeah. So I mean,
we had adverts for it here as well, didn't we? In London, all over the Underground. You know, all
London
those
Tube
posters that didn't seem to last very long. There was a big commotion. It was basically being advertised like a lovely, beautiful product. Like, you know, someone said like the girl's going to buy a nice pair of pajamas. No, she's going to buy euthanasia for her aging parents. Hooray! Isn't it lovely? You know. So they were pretty shocking. It was like I suddenly felt like I'd slipped into some kind of different parallel universe or alternative reality. It's like, sorry, because you know, we saw those films like I said, mentioned Logan's Run when I was a teenager. I saw that, and it's like, oh well.
Gold continues to surge to new highs as stocks fall. The threat of a global trade war is here, and you need to protect your savings. Stop trying to time the market and start buying today. Nuggetstacker.com.
I loved the film. I thought it was amazing, but in a tacky kind of way. And everyone was being euthanized at the age of 30 in that. Very much looking forward to it. It's like a mighty celebration.
Is this it?
That's it. Yeah, feel free to hit the play button. I mean,
I will.
Dying in a hospital is not what's natural. That's not what's soft. In these kind of moments, you need softness.
most beautiful exit.
It can take dying to figure out what living is actually like. I spent my life filling my heart with beauty, with nature, with connection. So I choose to fill my final moments with the same. Last breaths are sacred. When I imagine my final days, I see music. I see the ocean. I see cheesecake. Even now, as I seek help to end my life, with all the pain, and in these final moments, there is still so much beauty. You just have to be brave enough to see it. And seeing the rhythms of what's gonna keep going after I'm gone bring a lot of comfort.
Wow. That's disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, they've done that many times with euthanasia. They've presented it as something very beautiful. Like they did it with that young Dutch girl. I think she was only 29, and they released like pictures that were really like sensual of her sitting on a couch as if like euthanasia was sexy almost.
Right.
Yeah, it seems to be their pattern. But yeah, that that advert was disturbing. But I at the time of that release, I did a deep dive into that. And if you watch that advert again, you'll notice that a blue whale pops up again and again, maybe 4 or 5 times throughout the film. And in 2019, there was a suicide trend on the internet where like anonymous people would they'd contact like young vulnerable people, like teenagers or something, and they'd get them to do like a dare every day. And the dares would get progressively more extreme. Like it would start off like stand on your bed with a pillow on your head or something like that.
Sure.
And day 10 is like cut something into your arm. Day 30 would be kill yourself. And yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a coincidence that a blue whale is appearing in an advert about euthanasia.
What was the connection with the blue whale?
Well, so if I remember, it was called the blue whale.
Like challenge or something?
Yeah, blue whale challenge. Let me look it up. Just
Jackie, you were gonna
challenge. That's the one. Yeah. So yeah, it was a phenomenon around 2016.
Really?
That started and yeah, they would sort of target like teenagers or young people, that kind of thing.
And also, it's quite interesting that the woman in that Simon advert is a young woman, you know, because most people would connect involuntary euthanasia, people going over to Dignitas, to be elderly or someone who was actually totally incapacitated, like maybe in a wheelchair or what have you. She's presented as a young, attractive, healthy-looking woman who's even considering it. So it's like you can kind of see what they're doing there. If she's considering it and making it look really cool, then of course there's not a problem to encourage the elders to do it, you know. and a lot of the elderly people do feel like they're a burden to their kids, and it's very easy to make them believe it to the point that they just don't want to be that anymore.
But that's also messaging, don't you think, Jackie? Is the messaging that our elderly are past their prime and are useless and are a burden on society? I mean, that's part of the messaging that they want us to believe, as opposed to that they're elders and they have experience and knowledge. And, you know, there's obviously many more things that they can.
Well, the whole system is very ageist. So, for example, there is a frailty score in the National Health Service here in the UK, where an elderly person on admission into hospital will be scored, and it's completely ageist. You know, if you're over 80, you I don't know how many points you get exactly, but you get a high number, a high score for being old. You might be the healthiest, fittest, you know, Wim Hof 80-year-old that you've ever seen, but you still get a high score because you're old. And invariably, the consultants who decide that a person is end of life have never even met the patient. If it's in a hospital, for example, they just take a look at them and think, oh yeah, that's an old person, end of life. Maybe a glance at the charts. Oh, they've got this, they've got diabetes, they've got, you know, acute kidney disease. Yeah, let's get rid of them and free up the bed for the next one, you know. So, and I've heard many stories of that happening. I spoke to Dr. Patrick Pulicino, who's a Catholic priest and a retired neurologist, and he told me stories of that happening in hospitals where the consultant just goes round a ward and just glances and says, end of life, end of life, end of life, that one, not that one, that one, not that one.
Wow.
So it's pretty horrendous how that can happen. And we've heard the stories now, Richie and I have heard the stories ourselves firsthand from people, and obviously I've had my own personal experience. But there's so many people now that have had these experiences, and there will be many, many more if it's not stopped. So part of the reason for doing these films, and this new one in particular, is to try and get it stopped and to make sure that relatives of people who go into care homes and hospital are aware of it, so they can keep an eye on their loved ones, because there have been cases that I've heard of where when someone is being very, very closely watched by the family, that it doesn't happen. So, but then there's other stories where people are watching their loved one as much as they can, and it still happens. So, like I promised my dad it wouldn't happen to him, and it happened. You know, he wasn't in hospital, he wasn't in a care home. I managed to get him out of the care home so that sort of thing wouldn't affect him. Yet they still got him. So it's like, and so many stories of people who've been sitting at their loved one's bedside 24 hours a day, but then they nip home to have a shower or something, and that's when they do it. So a lot of stories like that, or they just leave the room, you know, to go to the toilet or something, and then they come back and it's been done. I've got one friend, she went to visit her mother in a care home one morning in 2021, and they said, oh, can you just wait a minute, we'll just get her ready for you, she's fine. And she'd spoken to her mother minutes previously on the phone, and then they came out 10 minutes later and said, oh, sorry, she's dead. And my friend was like, what do you mean she's dead? I've just come to visit her, she's fine. And they said, no, sorry, she's just died. So she rushed into the room, and there was a young carer there, like shaking uncontrollably, sobbing, because she'd just witnessed an execution. Right. So before my friend could go in and visit her mother, they executed her. And this young carer had witnessed it. She was only in her 20s and was completely traumatized by it.
The stories that you must hear, Jackie, I can't imagine. Now, Richie, I want to ask you this: so in the movie or in Unseen, there's a clip from the Scottish trials, and they're talking about the protocol, the Liverpool Care Protocol, and NG 163. So they say that they're going to phase them out. Now that sounds ridiculous if you're a logical person at all. Phasing out. If you're talking about murdering somebody, why don't you just stop it, you know, cold? But are they actually going to stop this? Are you seeing any benefit or any?
I seriously doubt it. I think. I mean, I think they saw that they have a massive pension crisis, a massive aged population, and they need to do something about that. And they started doing that with the Liverpool Care Pathway. and which was around sort of the 2010s, early 2010s. Then it was officially abolished in 2013. They even in the BBC clip I included in the documentary, they even admit that it's basically going on under a different name. But I think they need to do something by 2020 because they had a severe aging population.
Right.
And I mean, they brought in NG163 a couple of weeks before lockdown. And then when they replaced NG163, they replaced it with NG191. I mean, NG191 has the use of remdesivir for it. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with remdesivir, but
yes, sir.
they used that for the Ebola outbreak, and it was killing so many people in the trials. It killed like 54% of the trial participants, and because it causes kidney and liver failure. And I don't know if you can remember like the COVID times when they were talking about how COVID causes liver and kidney problems. So NG191, they were still killing people with like the failed drug remdesivir, which is horrendous. So I think they know that they have to continue doing this, and they're doing what they can to not kind of normalize it, to get people to think in their minds like if you're in your 20s or 30s, you'll think, oh well, 76 is a good run, or 81 doesn't sound too bad, kind of to gently normalize it. And if, I mean, as I said before, if you go back and watch It Clark, they've gone a whole couple of streets down from where that film was, because that film was basically trying to get the caring is killing. But now we're far beyond that. They're talking about all sorts if you look at Kim Leadbeater's campaign.
That's interesting. Well, you know what? We both have a socialist healthcare program, and we call it healthcare, but it's not. We both of our countries have this socialist healthcare where we say that it doesn't cost anything and it's basically free. And maybe this is the outcome. Maybe this is the what's supposed to come out of it is they're in charge of it and we have nothing to say. I don't know. Both of you probably have something to say about that.
Well, the NHS has been hollowed out. It's been privatized. It's almost a corporation in itself now. Virgin, I don't know, Richard Branson, he owns a huge chunk of the NHS through different clinics and that kind of thing. But even Ken McCarthy, he appears in the documentary, and he wrote What the Nurses Saw. And he said, and the protocols appeared in America where all their hospitals are privatized and owned by corporations, and they appeared there as well. So
we had so I was just actually I did an interview yesterday with Todd Callender, lawyer, owner of Clout Hub, yesterday, and he was talking about the bounty on people's heads essentially when they went into a hospital. The hospitals were paid a bounty of $500,000 when someone would die in their hospital. It's sickening. I mean, but it's so prevalent that it's not, not just in the UK, not just in Canada, not just in the United States. It's everywhere.
Have you heard of what's been brought in Australia recently? They're offering $4,000 for young women to abort their babies.
No,
they're paying for them to do that, and it made me, well, there's so many things wrong with that on so many levels. But one thing I thought is maybe some desperate young women might get pregnant and have an abortion to get the money,
Of course.
Yeah, which is a terrible thing. But you can see how that might happen. But it's just like, just when you think they can't come up with anything more evil, then they come up with something more evil. It's the most horrendous thing. And again, when I posted about that on X the other day, a lot of people said, "Oh, well, that's fake news. I don't believe it." And so people just don't want to believe it. And I said to someone, just because you don't believe it doesn't mean it's not happening. But I don't want to believe it either.
Right.
But a lot of people have that sort of attitude. If they don't want to believe it, they won't even look at it. Even some journalists are like that. And speaking of journalists, even now it's still impossible for me 4 years down the line, nearly 5 years down the line, to get anything on this subject published in the mainstream media. If I go to them with a story about an altercation in a supermarket, they'll buy that. They love that. But if I say, oh, and by the way, how about the story I've been showing to you for the last 5 years? Is it time to run that yet? Tumbleweed. They don't even come back and say no now. They just completely ignore any correspondence about that particular subject, about involuntary euthanasia in hospitals and care homes in the UK. They are obviously under instructions. I know some of these editors quite well now, and if I say, can you tell me why you can't run this story, they just do not reply. But if I then send them a travel story, for example, they reply immediately. So it's quite clear to me from them, without them actually saying anything, that they can't say anything, that they've maybe been told, not maybe there's some kind of D-notice on certain things. I mean, some of the papers now, like the Mail Online, have picked up on over the last year or so, vaccine injuries and deaths. Sorry, I don't know if you're allowed to say the V word on the podcast, but so-called, well, the jab injuries and deaths. They picked up on that. There was a little flurry of them for a short period of time, and then they seem to have stopped again. But at that time, I was then getting it up saying, that's terrible, but what about this, you know? And they just didn't want to go. I'm not going to stop. The last time I sent the story out was, I think, last week. So I every so often just send it out again saying, are you ready to run this story yet?
Right.
At one point in 2022, I said to them all, you know, if you don't publish this story, more people are going to die. Therefore, you are now complicit in the murders of these people. You have blood on your hands as editors on newspapers. Oh, they didn't like that very much. But then I said to one of them, why haven't you replied to my letter? Because sometimes, or my email should, because sometimes you're very rude. And I was like, what a snowflake. I'm sorry. I'm a journalist. You know, I'm never rude. I'm actually never rude, but I am straight to the point and can be a bit blunt sometimes. And that terrifies them. You know, that's like a crime these days, isn't it? Speaking the truth.
I think it's, besides them being all prostitutes in the mainstream media, because I don't trust a single thing. They're wrong on absolutely everything. Everything that they talk about is almost the opposite of what's actually going on. But if they dig too deeply, I genuinely think if they did dig too deeply on this, people are going to start asking, where did the first wave of COVID victims come from? And the only conclusion you can really come to is what Cy Wilson did in his paper, is that the first wave, so-called, was the midazolam deaths in Britain. So then you've got a whole series of questions. Well, we locked down the country for this. We injected how many billions of people with what?
Right.
You know?
Well, his study was very thorough, actually. I wrote an article about it for the Light newspaper. It was the headline story. And he reckons that at least 55,000 people were murdered in that April 2020 period in care homes. I think he was just actually talking about care homes in that study, because there was this sudden peak. And we now know, well, a lot of people believe that there wasn't such a thing as COVID. And if there was, it was just a type of flu, which to me isn't even a virus. It's a natural detoxing process of the body, which you can't.
Amen to that. Yeah.
So whatever you believe, even if you believe that there was a killer virus called COVID, all the people who believe that do now know, oh, well, it wasn't as bad as they said, you know, not enough to kill 55,000 people. And some care homes lost hundreds, you know, in that short period, which is just not possible. You know, it doesn't make any sense at all. So what happened to these people? That's the question. This is before the jabs were introduced. We're talking 2020.
Right.
The jabs weren't introduced till December that year. And then those deaths started kind of muddying the waters a bit, you know. And then all these other illnesses that were described as long COVID were actually jab injury, people becoming ill from having the injections. So then it all got very blurred, and people kind of forgot about what happened in the care homes. Because if it wasn't COVID, if it wasn't the injections, why did they all die in such
right?
That's the question that needs to be asked.
Okay, so the movie Unseen. Obviously, we want as many people to see that as possible. And how? Let's just figure out how do we get people to see it? So is it through your website, or is it just on YouTube, or what's the easiest way to look it up?
For the meantime, it's on YouTube, although we may consider putting it beyond a paywall once we premiere the film. I would recommend the best way is to Well, you can have the YouTube link and go to www.diplomaticpost.co.uk. Just because I don't trust YouTube or Google at all. If they do censor it and you go to my website, at least by then I'll have uploaded it somewhere else, like maybe Rumble or Odyssey, that kind of thing.
I'm gonna show your website here quickly to show everybody. So Diplomatic Post. This looks like a very a huge treasure trove to me. I started looking through it, and obviously there's lots of information here. So anyway, they can find the documentary right here.
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, and then obviously a number of different reports that you've done in here. And it sounds like we must talk again further.
Definitely, if you're pro Cole, I've got plenty of time for you.
Well, before we hit record, we started talking about Cole because he has a hashtag in there, bring back Cole, I think is what it said. And I thought, oh my God, that's my brother. We definitely have to talk about Cole and energy. Being the great province of Alberta, we are coal heavy here. Anyway, back to Unseen. Obviously, we want people to see this, and you want to pay an honor to the people, that participated, and obviously the people that have been lost in this process, because they are the unseen, right? And now, do you guys see? You said that there's so many people, Jackie. Do you see doing more of this? Do you see making more of something similar to get other people's stories? Is that what you're hoping to do?
Well, what I promised to all the members of my group as they joined is that if they want me to, I will try my best to get their story out into the public domain however I can, whether it's a newspaper article, whether it's an article on Substack, whether it's on a news website, or in a film or a video. And so far, I've done pretty well with that because I've included a lot of them in all those however I can. But we've got enough people in that group alone to probably make 10 more documentaries.
Yeah.
So I really don't know, obviously it costs to make documentaries, not just in money, but in time. And we spent like 5 months probably on this. We didn't raise very much with the crowdfunder, enough to maybe cover some of the initial expenses. But, these things do take up a lot of time and leave you heavily out of pocket. So that's the main obstacle that we face, I think, with making more. But if people are willing to support the projects, then I would definitely make some more. Would you, Richie?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you guys doing it. I mean, this is these really are heartfelt stories, and I mentioned that right off the bat is that it's very hard when you're so involved, and you're meeting these people and hearing these stories. Not unlike what we do on a regular basis, probably, Richie, is meet people and hear those stories. You have to be affected by those stories, and especially these really, really heart-wrenching stories of murder. And we got to call it what it is, right? I mean, this is straight up murder in your hospitals in the UK. I wonder if it's happening here, but I mean, I know that they're already slippery sloping into the Maid, so I don't know if they feel the need to be midazolaming people here in Canada yet. But those our numbers of Maid participants is upwards of around 30,000 people a year now, and I think the last time I looked at it was a few weeks ago, and something like 3,000 people died just waiting. They were on the list to get onto Maid in the year previous. I think that was 2023. But it's astounding, and we got to call out the propaganda that's pushing people into this, like this commercial. I guess it's a commercial for suicide. I don't know what to do now.
when you look at it from a financial point of view, it only costs a few $100s to put someone on the MAID program, but to actually keep them alive costs a lot more. So it's kind of obvious why they're trying to promote it. And this whole involuntary euthanasia thing has been worldwide. I mean, I've heard stories from Canada, from the US, where they use remdesivir instead of midazolam, from France, from Ireland, from Scotland, from Wales. But there are some countries where it doesn't seem to be happening. You know, I haven't heard anything from any African countries or anywhere in. I have heard one story in Thailand, but so a man who went into hospital after he fell off his bike, and the next thing he had been injected and was dead. So I think it's probably going on in more places than we realise, and that's why the whole thing is unseen. You know, a lot of people just accept that their elderly relative or a vulnerable relative has gone into hospital, and the next thing they're told, oh, they're dead. It's like, oh, well, yeah. And when you say, well, what did they actually die of? So many people have come to these sort of half stories. And I say, well, what did they actually die of? And they said, well, you know, they were in a care home and then they just died because they're old. They don't realize that people do not die of old age. You cannot die of old age. There has to be some condition that you've got. But people don't realize that, and they think, oh, well, they were old and they died. That's what happens. No, that's not what happens. And then when they start to look into it, they start to go, actually, do you know what? I think you might be right. You know, people need to get all the medical records, see the MAR, the drug charts, and that's the only way you can find out. But a lot of people who've even done that, there's pages missing, there's the whole chunks of it redacted, and bits hidden. You know, the important, the incriminating bits are often hidden or concealed or not presented. So there's a whole load of hurdles. I can see why people don't want to do it. I mean, I started the process with my dad. I told the police that he'd been murdered, that I believed he'd been murdered, and they pretended to investigate for a few months and then just said, oh, we're closing the case, without even contacting me in between. And I said, why are you closing it? They said, well, basically nothing's happened, everything was fine, we don't know what you're talking about. And I just thought I could have pursued that, but I know that these things can go on for years, sometimes, you know, a decade or more. One of the people in our film, she's been involved in activism to do with this since her dad was euthanized in hospital in 2012. So she's still fighting for justice for him. And unless you're prepared to give over a whole chunk of your life, it is worth doing, but you have to be prepared. And you have to have money. And most people don't have that kind of money to go legal. So I've got one friend who spent up to £20,000 and then had to stop because she'd run out of money.
Right.
So most people don't have the wherewithal to do it. So this is the problem that we're facing.
That's crazy.
And so, something that sticks in my mind is that Vernon Coleman, when I was on the phone to him for a podcast me and him recently did, he was saying to me that these people worked all their lives, they paid into a pension. It's not, their pension isn't like a benefit that they just, you know, and then they get bumped off at some point. It's their right to enjoy the end of their lives. And they're clearly intent on getting rid of that.
That's
right. If my dad had lived another 20 years, it would cost them another £500,000, I worked out, in his pensions and stuff. So they've saved, you know, if they bumped him off at 76 instead of letting him die naturally at 96, they've saved, that's just on one single person, £500,000. So can you imagine, you know, when they do the math, they must be absolutely so excited about this whole program, the euthanasia program, because it's saving them billions and billions of pounds.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay, we're going to wrap it up here. So perhaps you want to say something to the audience in regard to Unseen or what's going on in the hospitals. Richie, why don't you start?
Absolutely. So I recommend everyone watch the film, because when you watch the film, the only conclusion you can come to is that there was no COVID, there was no wave. The first wave was these hospital protocols that were designed to kill people. And that opens a whole can of worms. And towards the end of the conclusion, I sort of draw attention to that, questioning the whole of virology, which as far as I'm concerned is a complete fraud. It dates back to the Rockefellers in the 1890s when they created like the pharma industrial complex, and that's kind of ruled us ever since with their germ theory and virology. I definitely recommend, if anything to take away, watch the film.
Fantastic. Jackie?
I would say if you don't want to know about anything like that, don't watch the film, because we've covered pretty much everything. No, because it is scary stuff, and people cannot handle it. A lot of people, like my kids, won't watch it. They're adults, but they're like, "Mom, it's too depressing. You know, why would I want to watch that?"
Yeah.
So, and it is depressing, and a lot of people cannot handle that. They've got enough to deal in their life with it, within their life. But if you are interested and you do want to know more, or if you have any suspicions about any of your loved ones, friends or family, then I would recommend that you definitely watch it. And also, if you do have anyone that you know that you're close to going into hospital or into a care home, just keep a very close watch on them.
Amen to that. Thank you so much, both of you. I am so grateful that you've come on to share Unseen and your experiences, with these people. Obviously, it's been, like I said, a heart-wrenching, heartbreaking stories. And so I do appreciate you going through all of that for humanity, really. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for being the first podcaster to interview us about the film.
Oh,
yeah, thanks for your time.
My pleasure. And if you don't mind sticking around, I'm going to say goodbye to my audience, and then we'll catch up after we hit record. So thank you very much for being here. Obviously, to share this information out, get some more eyeballs on this, because we need to wake more people up to what's going on in the world so we can save humanity. All right, this is Bruce, and I'm out.
Thank you so much for watching Unscrew the News. I appreciate your participation in freedom in Canada. Share this information and help others to wake up. God bless.